Shalom, shalom, everyone. Welcome, everyone, once again to the Shabbat Night Talk. My name is Uziel Lewy. I'm one of the teachers of Congregation D.C.B, CHOKMAH BINAH. And tonight we're here with a special guest, our sister Leah, who I met down in well, I've known her for a while, but we seen each other in North Carolina down there, and she did a presentation, and I thought that the presentation was great, and I thought that we could bring the presentation over to our platform. So I'd like to thank our sister for being there and being willing to bring forth the platform. So first of all, giving due respect to the God of Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob, the God of Yisrael. We thank him for our lives. We thank him for food, clothing, and shelter. We thank him for knowledge, wisdom, and understanding, and all the things that he provides for us in our lives. We thank him for knowledge of self and for the blessing of the Shabbat day, which it is a blessing if we keep it in his proper perspective. So, giving due respect to our God, Yehovah Elohim, giving due respect unto him and him alone. Also, let me open up the chat to all the new people that are on, or anyone that might be new, or anyone that you might want to invite. You could do so. Share the link on all your social media. Let everybody know that our sister Leah is on with us tonight. I know it's pretty late, but Shabbat Shalom to everyone that's on the chat with us. And I hope that you will be listening keenly to our sister, and because she has a very powerful message that she brought forth. So Shalom Ima, I've read you're gonna kill me. I know you're gonna kill me. I'm sorry. I know I had to get back to you, but I was so super busy this week. But we're gonna definitely get that stuff done. I want to get that done with you, and I want to do that stuff with you that I spoke to you about. So please forgive me, Ima. I beg you to forgive me. I just been super busy. Last week we had a wonderful time at the park. For all of you that didn't make it out, I know some people came and got lost and left, went back home. Shabbat Shalom, Ima Naami. Good to see you. That interview is going up soon. Don't worry. Shabbat Shalom. Itamar, Shabbat Shalom, More Zadok, Shabbat Shalom to everybody in the room. Shabbat Shalom to the family from here and far. May the Most High God bless each and every one of you. There was something that I wanted to say. I believe that we have a new person in the room. Brother Jerome, I don't know if he's up listening to us. I communicated with this elder throughout the week, and it was a wonderful experience. So just want everybody to give a big welcome and a shalom to Brother Jerome if he's listening to us. Shalom, shalom. Shalom to everyone in the room. Hey, shalom, Brother Will. Good to see you in the room in the chat. Now, I don't know how well everyone is going to get to hear on Facebook Live. Is going to get to hear our sister Leah. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to share the link. I'm going to share the link for the people on Facebook Live. I'm going to put the link on the Facebook Live page so that you could go to YouTube, where you'll be able to hear her clearly if you can't hear her clearly on Facebook Live. So what I'm going to do, give me 1 second here. I'm going to share that link right now. Here we go. Once you get the link, all you got to do is press on it if you can't hear her that well. So there you go. That's the YouTube link for everyone, because she's going to do a screen share and you might not be able to hear her that well on Facebook Live. I know you can hear me good on Facebook Live, but you might not be able to hear her. So there goes the link for all of you that want to be able to hear her. So before we before we start out. Now, I introduce to you our sister Leah. Leah, are you there?
Cain, I am.
Hallelujah. Blessed be the God of Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob. Thank you for being with us tonight. Can you give us a little brief history about, who you are, who you're related to, and so forth and so on, so that people will have a little history of who you are?
Sure. Just a brief history. I grew up in New York with the Shabbat Yisrael. My mother is a coach Shoshana, and in Charlotte. She lives in Charlotte currently. She's the sister of Cohen Mikael, from who's in Guyana currently. I moved to Atlanta about 3 years ago. So I'm currently stationed in Atlanta. My background, I have a master's degree in social work. I'm not a psychotherapist. I know that you mentioned that earlier in talking about introducing me. But I am a social worker slash therapist. I've been a therapist for about 4 years.
Okay.
And currently I work with doing individual and family counseling with an agency. I've been working with different agencies since I got my master's degree in social work, and looking forward to bringing some of the knowledge and wisdom that I've gained through doing therapy into our community.
Thank you very much, sis. And so, once again, just a brief announcement to the people on Facebook Live. She's about ready to and Leah, just start getting your slide prepared. Start getting it prepared, because after I finish with this announcement, then it's on you, and you could take over. So, to the people on Facebook Live, I put the link up there for the YouTube channel. Now, if you're on Facebook Live and when she was speaking, you could hear her clearly, please give me a thumbs up. If when she was speaking, you could hear her clearly, just give me a thumbs up. When our sister Leah was speaking, if you could hear her clearly, give me a thumbs up. All right, that's a heart. That's not a thumbs up. Okay, so everybody could hear her clearly when she was speaking. Great. So you can hear her clearly. So if you don't want to go to YouTube, and on YouTube, you're going to definitely hear her super clear. But if you could hear her clearly, then that's great. Shabbat Shalom, Ima Elishadai. Shabbat Shalom, Leah. Shabbat Shalom, Terrence. Mazaria Abdil Yah. Shabbat Shalom, my brother Itamar Yehuda. Shabbat Shalom. And Shabbat Shalom to everyone else that's in the chat. So the sister's not a psychotherapist. I always exaggerate, but she's not a psychotherapist. She deals with therapy, social worker, but hey, being black people, we almost gotta be psychotherapists. So I'm not too far away from it. So we thank the sister once again for being here with us. And at this time, I will take it away, sis.
Toda Rabah, I appreciate that. First of all, giving all honor and praise to Yah, Yahuwah. To all those striving for righteousness in his name, I greet you in perfect peace. Shabbat Shalom to everyone. I'm so glad to be here. I'm so excited that I get to share this information, this knowledge, and that I have willing people who are excited to hear it. It's been a long time coming, and really trying to put this information into the ears of the people and have people excited about it. So I'm very excited to share with you this evening. I did give you a brief introduction about myself, about my background. Why am I this 29-year-old sister coming as a speaker on this particular topic when there's a wealth of knowledge out there from older folks who've been in this culture a long time. But I feel like this particular topic has been under-addressed. So being that I'm a avid, person that is for mental health. I'm a fighter for our people. I feel like what better than a young person to come and possibly open the minds of the people. Just want to first do a prayer. Yahuwah Sabatai Tiftaku fi Yagita Hilatecha. So this presentation is about rebuilding the nation, or rebuilding a nation. And specifically talking about reversing the effects of post-traumatic slave syndrome. So I'm not sure if everyone is familiar with this term. I'm pretty sure most people have heard it somewhere. If you're reading anything about Black history, slavery in the United States of America, you're talking about some type of traumatic effects that it's had on our community. So it's been coined, the term has been coined, post-traumatic slave syndrome. We all know about post-traumatic syndrome, where people have gone to war, they've come back from war, and they've had some post-traumatic stress. And these are the same symptoms that we see in people of African descent who experienced the slave trade and are now trying to live and thrive. So this presentation is really addressing that, its effects on our people, and how to overcome that. And it's really getting to some specific details and some specific ways that we can overcome some of the challenges that we've had having post-traumatic slave syndrome. So captivity, of course, we always talk about captivity, living in hell, living in the United States, in diaspora, and it's the serious damage that is done on our people. We talk about, of course, we see it in the news. We see people are getting killed by cops. We see that, we see injustices when it comes to the judicial system. And we see and experience all of that. Some of us have direct experience with some of that, and we see that it's done some damage to us. We didn't really expect that it would have the long-lasting and deep effects that it has. Of course, we see some of the surface effects, but we don't really consider the things that affect us more deeply. And some stuff so deep that just reading the Tanakh and knowing the scriptures is not enough to handle some of these things. It's affected us individually. It's affected our families. It's affected our communities. And it's affected the nation as a whole. So I'm going to talk about just some of the individual effects and each level of effect that it's had on us. Of course, the effects is generational. When we have one generation, that experienced, was there, and had the effects of slavery and the stress that came with that, and they passed that down to the next generation and to the next generation. And you had the 60s when they had their experience with stress and dealing with the injustices of the country, and passing that down to the next generation and their ways and their habits that have been formed over the years. And then after a while, it builds. And so some of the characteristics that we have now are a result of some of the stress that our people have had. So I want to read this first slide for you. I'm going to start here. So this first slide is called the nigger marriage. And this gives you a full picture about what I'm talking about. So I'm going to read it pretty slow. I'm pretty sure some of you may have seen this before. So it says, we breed 2 nigger males with 2 nigger females. Then we take the nigger males away from them and keep them moving and working. Say one nigger female bears a nigger female and another bears a nigger male. Both nigger females being without influence of the nigger male image, frozen with an independent psychology, will raise their offspring into reverse positions. The one with the female offspring will teach her to be like herself, independent and negotiable. We negotiate with her, through her, by her. We negotiate her at will. The one with the nigger male offspring, she being frozen with a subconscious fear of his life, will raise him to be mentally dependent and weak, but physically strong. In other words, body over mind. Now, in a few years, when these two offsprings become fertile for early reproduction, we will mate and breed them and continue the cycle. That is good, sound, and long-range comprehensive planning. So as you can see, it was very strategic. Their method was very strategic in how they planned to tear up our families. It attacked the individual, and it was supposed to be generational and long-lasting. It was supposed to be something that you couldn't get rid of. You know, your children would be affected and their children would be affected. And we see the effects of that today because we see the way that we interact with each other, the way that we interact in relationships, and we see the effects of this nigger marriage, the way that they tore our families apart. It was designed to make us handicapped, to make us unable to really succeed, to give us a cripple so that so that when we try to, you know, reproduce and build, that there will always be this lingering effect on our families that would tear us apart, to tear the nation apart. It was designed to attack the minds of the people, to change the way they thought about family, to change the way they thought about themselves and their importance and their position in the family. So in clinical terms, when we talk about this type of situation where experiences have molded and changed the way that you deal with people, in clinical terms, therapists like me, we call it trauma, right? So when we're talking about, you know, experiences that people have had that mold and shape them, we say, you know, it was a traumatic experience. Someone has been through some trauma. And a lot of people don't like to think of it as trauma because they're like, I'm not traumatized. You know, I haven't, you know, I'm not traumatized. I may have went through something, but I'm not traumatized. But I want to put it in a simpler term, in a simple way of thinking about it. So let's say you're in a car, and in this car, you're driving on the highway. You're following all the rules of the road. You put on your blinker when you're supposed to. You're driving at the speed limit. You're doing everything you think is supposed to be safe. And out of nowhere, a car comes and comes into your lane out of nowhere and smacks into your car. It sends your car flying into the median, over the railing, into the other lanes coming the opposite direction. Another car comes and hits your car, and your car flips over and lands in the grass. Now you're unharmed. You have a few scrapes and bruises, but you're okay. It was a pretty bad accident, but you're okay. And everybody walks away just fine. You go to the hospital, they check you out, you get your little check. You're like, all right, I can get my new car, I can move on with my life. And you get your new car, and you get on the highway, and what do you experience? You experience some stress. You start thinking about the accident that you had. You become overly conscious of everything and overly aware of everything around you. You become super sensitive. So even when someone is slightly close to you, you get nervous. You might swerve a little bit even. You may get really angry on the road or really scared. Some people may be fine. They may get in that car and be able to drive like nothing happened. And other people may get in their car and have a panic attack. And that is what we call trauma. We call it just an experience that's happened to you that affects the way that you deal with people and things and places in the future. Sometimes it's something that's small, and sometimes it's something huge. So, what are the effects of living in captivity? What are the effects of living in hell? So, we just have some some examples of some of the things that we may experience. And of course, this is a short list. Some of the things that we experience in captivity. We call it the captivity experience. So we experience something like broken homes, child abuse, police brutality, neglect, sexual abuse, murder, sickness, death, don't snitch. You know, that whole culture that goes with that, living with perpetrators, rape, incest, domestic violence, the side chick culture, right? Adultery, and of course, there's many other things that we experience in hell. So the assumption is that we come into this culture, and we're Hebrews, right? We come into this culture, we find out who we are, we open up the Tanakh, and we say, aha, all the answers to my prayers have, you know, they've all been answered. My prayers have been answered. I know who I am. I can move forward. I can heal. But what we do is we bring a lot of the baggage that we've accumulated in hell with us, some of the abuse and neglect with us. We bring some of the trauma with us. And because we don't necessarily deal with that and aren't realistic and honest about it, it affects the way that we communicate with people, and it affects our relationships. It affects our families, and then in turn, it affects the nation. After a while, we start to see the conflict. Small things happen. Like you realize, why that sister always got an attitude? Every time I see her, she got an attitude on her face. And we think it's us. Oh, she just don't like me. And then all of a sudden, we have a poor relationship because of how we're dealing, or our perception about someone's facial expression, the way they handle situations. Oh, every time I walk by her, she don't say shalom, or you know, she looks like she's under distress. Or this brother, you know, he looks angry. He seems angry. He seems to snap every time somebody tells him to do something. Sometimes we're bringing some of that trauma in with us, our experiences with us. And we forget that it affects us. And the Tanakh doesn't fix that. The Tanakh doesn't fix the traumatic experience that comes with rape. And we'd like to think that that doesn't happen in our culture, right? We'd like to think we don't have the effects of hell in our culture, but we do. We do have those things. And a lot of times what happens is, because we like to put blinders on and think the Tanakh fixes it, and the Tanakh fixed us, we kind of turn a blind eye to the serious traumatic experiences that we put ourselves through, and we repeat the cycle. We brought the experiences of a broken home with us into this culture, and so therefore we don't know how to be in a relationship. And so when we get in one and we pursue and we find a mate, we don't know how to be in a relationship. And then we have children, and our children see the way that we deal in that relationship. And then when we break up and we divorce, the children see that too. And they repeat the cycle because now they've experienced a broken home. They've experienced child abuse or neglect. And in some cases, sexual abuse. We'd like to think that that wasn't the case, but we have to be realistic and honest about what happens in our communities. Death happens in our communities. Sometimes our children stray and they die. How does that affect parents and communities? Adultery happens in our communities. Now, this is a big one because we all read the Tanakh, but we all know our communities, and we know what happens. We know what happens when we go into our communities and we see something funny going on, and we say nothing, and we do nothing, and we allow it, and it perpetuates the cycle. We bring those experiences to the next generation because they watch us. Everything that you've done is a result, and everything that you know and experience and do and are living in your life right now is a result of what you experienced in your past. Your family relationships, right? Your schooling, where you lived, they all contribute to who you are as a person. And so when you experience traumatic situations and you don't deal with them, you bring them with you. You bring them like baggage everywhere you go. And it changes the way that you relate to people. Comparing it to that car crash, all of a sudden, you have road rage. Or you can't get in your car and you become stiffened with fear. Or you get really angry and you lash out at people, and that affects the way you deal with relationships. So there's some physical effects of the captivity too, right? Some health effects. Some people have trouble sleeping when they have a traumatic experience. They have heart issues, skin issues, substance abuse issues. These are all things that could happen. The emotional effects, anxiety, flashbacks, self-esteem issues, and a hard time regulating emotions. This is key. Because we like to think that we have the songs of Solomon to calm us down when we're getting a little frustrated, but that's not always the case. And a lot of us have anger issues. A lot of us have trouble regulating our emotions. And so when we do come to experiences, when we have to communicate with people, whatever the experiences that you've had from your past, whether it be emotional abuse or sexual abuse, sometimes that can be triggered. And that's important to know. It's important to know that your past can trigger you. Because now every time you hear that car horn, you think about that crash. And every time you hear that sister screaming, that reminds you of when your mother sucked her teeth. Or that brother that gets real forceful with you and speaks very demeaning to you, reminds you of your uncle who did the same. And you're triggered. And then everyone wonders, why is she responding so severely to such a minor situation? It affects us. So just like the nigger marriage, it has effects on women, and this experience has effects on men. Both of us have been affected. It affects the way we communicate with each other. Because depending on what your trauma is and what you've experienced in your life, it can really affect your ability to communicate with the opposite sex and really have sustainable relationships. It affects our ability to trust, our ability to lead. Anger and attitudes from women can drive men away. If you haven't dealt with some of the issues that you've had in your past, and you have a traumatic experience, anything that has, caused you to have a buildup that you haven't dealt with, it really can come out as lashing out, anger, really suspicious, always suspicious because you're lacking trust. And with men, it affects their ability to lead because there's a insecurity that comes with having a traumatic experience. When you're on the road and you have an accident, and depending on the person, they're not confident in their driving anymore. So you have grown men sometimes who aren't able to lead because of their confidence. And sometimes they're so hurt and they have issues dealing with their emotions and handling their emotions and letting emotion out, that they feel those emotions with women. And so it would seem that a man would be wanting to build a family, that he would get a wife and have children and possibly build on that family. And that family would pursue and build with another wife. But sometimes when you're void in the inside and you're feeling an empty place that was missing with the love and affection that you needed from your own family, you try to capture that from other people. Sometimes women do it. That comes out as promiscuous behavior, and men in the same. We like to think that it would be like, non-promiscuous men because, they might have another Isha or another wife that they have in the cut, but just evaluating the why. The why, there's always a side chick. Are you feeling frustration, emotion, emptiness, or are you nation building? And sometimes that emptiness comes off as aggression. You have situations with women when they've had traumatic experiences. Sometimes it's as simple as not having a father in the home. And not having a father in the home and having a broken home makes it very difficult to trust and really put your faith in men. And so when you finally do get a man in your life, and not to say this is all women, we're just putting some scenarios out there that sometimes it could have an effect on how you deal with your husband because you don't trust him and you challenge him and you make him insecure. And all these things are happening at once because you have two individuals who are dealing with some traumatic experiences that happen in life. They're not really checking their triggers. And so when they're triggered and they both go off, they have arguments. They yell, and their children watch. And they see. And they learn. Because everything we do is learned behavior. Just taking it back just a little bit about its effects on men and women. So not only does it affect the relationships between men and women, but it affects the relationships between women and men and men. Because if you grew up in a home where your mother was abusive, or you didn't trust in your family, or you didn't have very close bonds, it can make it very difficult to bond with other women. Especially in these large communities when you have a large number of sisters. And you have to get along with them, and you have to work with them. And if you don't have the experience of getting along and being in successful relationships with women, it makes it very difficult. And with men, it becomes difficult to build brotherhood relationships when you don't trust other men. When you're not used to having a father in the home to tell you, this is what's best for you. You're used to a woman leading you, or you're used to being the head of your home, the male figure in your home at a young age. So when you become a brother in a community, your instinct is to say, well, I'm not listening to this person, this chief, this star, this Nasik, this whoever. Because I'm smart too. And I don't need to listen to him. And I'm going to form my own community. It affects us. It affects our relationships with each other. So when we have these families and we pursue, and how we pursue is always being watched by each generation. So it's affecting us individually, but when we go into communities and we start marrying each other and marrying again in some cases, the way that process works is also being watched. So when you have men who are filling voids instead of building nations, it affects the way that women deal with each other because they're always suspicious. Because if you don't do it right, and you're not transparent, and you don't deal with your trauma, you can traumatize someone else. You can make their experience with love, with family, and with nation building stressful and something they don't want. Because there are generations growing up who don't want to get married because they see the effects that it's had on the people that they see in their communities. They see the strife between the women. They see that the women can't get along because every time a new sister comes up in there, everybody's a little suspicious because they don't know what the men are going to do. Not because, they don't want to build their family, but because they're not trusting their men. And sometimes men don't give them enough to trust about. Their experiences that we're repeating the cycle. So what is the impact that it has on our youth? Like I said, everything is learned behavior. And how we love and how we receive love is learned from the ones around us. Our interpersonal relationships are learned. So when the youth see how you pursue, and how you got another wife. They learn about relationships. They learn if you snuck and got another wife. They learn if those wives don't get along. They learn if you have one wife and your relationship is troublesome. They see that. They learn how to communicate. They learn when you slam doors, when you argue, when you curse at each other, when you don't trust your husband. They learn from that. When you take over and take control, they learn all of that. They learn what is attractive, and they learn how to search for a mate. They learn the proper process of searching for a mate or joining a family, an existing family. They learn that process. So when the way that you pursue a family, and I'm very important to say pursuing a family, not pursuing a man, they learn how to pursue a family through you. They learn what is acceptable behavior and what is unacceptable behavior. And when you don't do it right, some children will say, I don't want to get married that way. But if they don't have the example of the right way, how are we able to build this nation successfully? They're always watching, and you repeat and contribute to the cycle when you don't recognize how you're in what you do and the things that you experience in your family and the effects that it has on the children. You can be a really big contributor to the problem if you don't recognize your own contribution. So what do we do about it? How do we handle such a big job in saving our families? Of course, it starts with you. So this is just a little diagram, I guess you would call it, about how we are supposed to fix this. So we start with ourselves. You have to know your past and know your triggers. Only you know what you've experienced in your life. And sometimes you tell people minor details, but the intricacies of how it affects you, you know. And you have to be honest about it. I'm always advocating for individual therapy for everyone. Because sometimes we don't even realize some of the effects that some experiences that we've had has had on us. We don't know the effects of, not having a dad who was affectionate has on us, or a mom. Self-care is so important. Taking time for yourself to really evaluate, meditate, counseling, and building your interpersonal skills. When you know your triggers and you know, dang, man, every time, I think about my dad, I get in this mood. And I go, I'm around these sisters, and I could tell that they could see something's wrong with me. And being able to understand how you're going to communicate that so that you can continue to build relationships while you're dealing with your trauma, while you're dealing with your daddy issues, while you're dealing with issues with your parents and your mom and your siblings, that you can communicate that in terms that people understand. That you will be able to go to people and say, hey, I'm just having a really bad day. It's nothing anyone did to me. I just, if I'm a little quiet, you'll know why. To be able to say that and be comfortable in that. And also to receive that information, to know that people can sometimes it not be you. It could be something going on with them. To be able to say, wow, the sister walked by me and she didn't say shalom. And not take it personal to say, oh, she's rude. She just didn't say shalom to me. But to turn that around and say, I wonder what that sister's going through. She must be going through something because she usually says shalom. So she must be stressed. To be able to turn that around so that you're building relationships and not tearing them down. To be able to go to sister, I know I've seen you seem to be a little upset today. You okay? Just checking on you. Instead of assuming that it's you. And once we do that and we deal with ourselves, then we can deal with our families, right? We can deal with what's in our houses, with our spouses, with our children. counseling. I'm always going to advocate for that. Family counseling and couples counseling. We don't advocate enough for premarital counseling. Premarital and marital counseling along the way. Just because you're married and you've already done it doesn't mean you don't need a little bit of assistance, reassurance along the way. Create the standard in your home. How are you guys going to deal with dating with your children? What is the standard for that? What is the standard for pursuing in your family? And when I say pursuing, I'm talking about when your children want to gain, relationships with other children, what age that's supposed to be, what that looks like, how they're doing it, who's supervising, what does that look like for your family? Because we want to prevent some of this trauma that's happened with children on children abuse as well, because that's a real thing. And then also creating the standard for your own marriage of what pursuit looks like. And to be honest, open, and truthful about that. And adhere to it. To say this is the standard and I'm adhering to that. Creating the standard is so important for your personal home. And start talking about and modeling interpersonal skills. How do you communicate with sisters when you have a problem with them? How do you communicate with brothers when you have an issue? Because your children are watching and they learn how to have positive relationships through you. And don't sweep trauma under the rug. That is a big thing in our families in the Black community. We sweep trauma under the rug because we think that, you don't want to tell, you don't want to get such and such in trouble. We don't want to use this, the American system and jails and all of that. But if your child receives or is experiencing some type of abuse, what do we do about that? And what is the standard in your family? And how do you talk to your children about that and their ability to communicate with you about that? This is an important conversation. It's important to talk to your children about whose lap they're able to sit on, whose house they're able to sleep at. Creating the standard for your family. And when you're done with that, we can move on to the community, because communities build up of families, right? So when you're in your communities, creating the standard. What is the standard in the community for dating, for courting, premarital counseling? These are all important issues that the community has to have a standard for. Because when a 17-year-old decides that, they want to get married to this 21, 27, 30-year-old, what is the community standards for that? What is the standards for counseling, and what availability is there for counseling? What methods are we using to be able to address people who have serious mental health issues? Because we like to think that our leadership can deal with it in our communities. We like to think that the leadership is able to counsel our people, but not all leadership is trained to deal with mental health issues, to deal with trauma, abuse, sexual abuse. And so we can't rely and depend on someone who's not trained to deal with that to handle some of those issues for us. It's okay in these communities to refer to an outside source. I would, my prayer is that we don't have to always go on the outside, but sometimes we do. Sometimes people need real counseling from real professionals. Creating a standard for premarital counseling is so important in communities. A lot of times, the dating and courting process goes really untouched, and people are really allowed to do what they want. And so, especially when it becomes an issue with someone pursuing a family, we break up homes left and right when we are pursuing families. And when I'm talking about a multi-wife family. We break up homes left and right Not because it's not possible, but because we don't do it in a way that would make it successful. So we have to create a standard for that. We have to create a process for that, no matter if it's a monogamous family or polygamous family. We have to create the standard in our communities for that. And again, don't sweep trauma under the rug. When you're in these communities and issues arise, big issues, the small and the large, how do we deal with them? We cannot allow our communities to become safe havens for abusers. Because once you let an abuser, and when I'm talking about an abuser, I'm talking about sexual abuse, physical abuse, verbal abuse. I'm talking about people who just wreak havoc on families, who break up homes. When you see children who are suffering because their parents are suffering, how do we deal with that? Do we pretend like it doesn't exist? What is the consequence? How do we try to revive that family? For that is important, and not sweeping it under the rug as if it doesn't exist. And once we deal with our community, each community, the standard, then we can work on building this nation. We can build a nation standard for how we're courting and how we're pursuing and all of those great things. My just a little advice to parents is, when you're trying to build a nation, you have to accept that your children are not always going to find their mate in your community. They're going to have to venture out, right? In my family, I have a large family, but we're also married into another large family about 8 to 9 times, almost to the point where they're cousins, kinda, because we didn't marry them so many times, you know? And so after a while, you got to start venturing out, because you're going to start marrying your cousins, you know? And this is how we build a nation. This is how we mend and build those communities together. When you have two communities that are related by marriage because their children are marrying each other, that's how you build a nation. So my snippet of advice is, when you have community events like they have in New York when they have a Unity Shabbat, in Atlanta when they have Yom L'Mokarim, in Israel when they have Nuwot Passover, in Charlotte when they have the Shabbat Ahav, in Guyana when they have their events, bring your children. Bring your teenage, dating age children, because they're going to be able to communicate and engage with other children their age and learn the courting process. Supervised. They learn what's attractive. But when you leave them in the schools and you leave them with their friends that are part of the world, a part of hell, who also have their own traumas, you leave them open to learning what's attractive from their friends that are outside the community. And encourage professional degrees. Now, this is important because we don't have a lot of institutions in our nation. We have a few, but not very many. But in order to build institutions, you need professionals. And when I say professionals, I'm talking about skilled people. So now I'm not just trying to big up myself, but it's important that we have trained individuals in specific areas, because just like we need carpenters and we need electricians, we need therapists, we need doctors, we need surgeons, and these are all important to building a nation. And having professionals that can really deal with mental health issues is really important, because we can then relate to the culture. We can pull from the scriptures and we can communicate with the leadership. And it creates a more holistic treatment for someone who really needs therapy, rather than going to an outside source who has no idea about the culture, who has no communication with the leadership, and really doesn't know very much about you. So encouraging professionals, your children and yourself to be professionals in this field, to really handle counseling is super important, to build this institution of marriage, to rebuild it. Another key point is don't allow perpetrators to live comfortably in our nation, in our communities, and in our nation. When you have people who have had some, they traumatize other people, they're abusers, they have a history, you've seen the sister break up a family, you've seen the brother get another sister pregnant. How do we address those things and not allow the person to live comfortably? Because what will happen is that we will be a safe haven, our nation will, for perpetrators who know that they will not be persecuted. They have easy access to children. They have easy access to wives who are easily manipulated, women. Sometimes we have women who come in as perpetrators, who know that they could seduce men and have no consequence. They can have a baby with a married man and with no consequence. They can be a side chick, be comfortable with no responsibility to the family, and be comfortable. And we cannot breed that. And then, of course, we got to seek refuge outside of the U.S. if we really want to heal ourselves. We got to seek refuge out of hell, because you're only going to continue the cycle and put yourself in the fire when you're here. You're only exposing yourself to the trauma. You're exposing yourself to the news where you hear about the shootings. And your anger, I know I can't be the only one. When I watch the news or I watch some YouTube or, Facebook video of someone getting shot or, abused by the police or whatever, that anger, when you're reading the Facebook comments, that anger that builds up inside of you, that's traumatic. That causes something in you. So when I go to work the next day and I have to stare at particular people in the face, I get a little angry. And that's the way I can communicate with them. So, of course, all our solutions are going to be further successful if we seek and refuge outside of the U.S., outside of captivity. And so I pray that this information was something that you needed to hear, that it can be spread, that the Most High would really put it in our spirits to take this seriously, to rebuild this nation, to rebuild our families from the inside out, to be honest and truthful about what's going on in our communities, and really create some plans, strategic plans on how to address them. So with that being said, I leave you as I came, in perfect peace. Shabbat Shalom.
Hallelujah. Thank you, my sister Leah, for that beautiful presentation. And I wrote down some things here. Just down to my last word. So definitely a lot of things that we needed to hear. At this point, I don't know if anyone wants to call in and wants to speak to our sister. The number is 347-622-9090, 347-622-9090. Our sister Leah did an excellent job. And like I told y'all, this is why I wanted to bring her on, because I felt like she hit to a lot of points that were that are relevant in our community and the things that we need to understand and know. So I wanted to ask you, I wanted to start out before anybody calls in. I don't know if anybody's going to call in at this time, but I wanted to ask you a couple of questions, my sister. So what are some of the triggers that you were speaking about? Some of the things that we could identify as being triggers that you know of that sets a person off, or that make a person react a certain way? What are some of the triggers, being that you work in the field?
Right. So it depends. It depends on the person. So, for example, you may have a person who grew up in a family where there was a lot of verbal abuse, a lot of screaming. And so they could be triggered by that. If they are talked to in a certain way by someone, they're in a community and someone gets a little loud, they could be triggered by that. And that could cause them to go off. Sometimes it's just somebody telling you what to do, you know, and you are not used to that because you didn't have that. And it depends on the person. Sometimes we forget too that when we have perpetrators, or you have people in your community who are known offenders, that can trigger someone who's had that experience, particularly in their life. So when you have someone who's, being promiscuous or breaking up homes, and you have someone who had a broken home themselves by, their stepmom came in and broke up their parents' marriage, and they had to live with their stepmom, that could be traumatic for someone. And then to have to look in that sister or brother's face who is doing the same thing could create some tension, because that is a trigger for them to even have to look at you as a trigger, because they know that you are, the person that broke up a marriage or causing the breakup of a marriage or whatever. That could be a trigger for someone. It could be a trigger because you look like the person that was an abuser. It could be a lot of things, and that's why it's important for us as individuals to know our triggers, to really understand ourselves and what we've been through in our lives, and to really be honest about how we deal and how we communicate with people as a result of that. And then how we're going to fix that, how we're going to communicate differently, because you can't change someone's face if they look like your uncle who abused you, but you can change the way that you deal with that person, get some therapy and how to work through it, so that you're not causing a strain in that relationship.
Great. No, I got several questions. So I know you spoke about people having daddy issues and people, whatever issues they might have. And a lot of times in a relationship is maybe one person that has the issues and the other person has to deal with them. And however you deal with them, some people resolve it, some people figure it out, so forth and so on. But what is the how do you resolve if both people in the relationship have issues? Whatever those issues might be, different, like you said, maybe a man reacts a certain way to someone yelling at them, and the wife might come from a situation where yelling was perfectly okay, and she thinks that that's the way that she should deal with things. And this guy might have had a father that was tough, that always yelled at him, or he got a slap upside his head every time his father spoke to him. How do you deal with situations like that? Because I think that's important. I don't know how you, if you'll be able to answer that.
Well, I think it starts with the individual, because whether you have a relationship with two people who have, some issues, or just one, I mean, everybody, I always advocate for everyone to go see a therapist. Whether you think you have issues or not, it's just good to be able to talk to someone about your experiences of life. And not really to talk about a traumatic situation, just to really help define yourself.
Okay.
But also, if you're having issues, I would always advocate for seeing a therapist, for seeing a counselor, and couples counseling helps as well, because when you always want to be able to have an individual counselor paired with a couples counselor, because a lot of times when you're doing the couple work, you really need that individual attention to talk about your specific issues.
Okay, so
when you're seeing an individual or a couples counselor, you got someone who can help you with individual stuff too.
Okay, so when it comes to a couples counselor, are you speaking about within the nation, or are you talking about outside of the nation?
I'm talking about both. So there are some situations where we have, you know, people who are counselors or considered counselors in our community, They may not have degrees or anything like that, but their leadership who have been counseling our people and doing a pretty good job at it when it comes to couples counseling. And that's perfectly okay. But when we get to the point when we start to bring up some other issues that are beyond the capabilities of that particular leader or the leadership, then we have to be able to seek out professionals. When you see somebody has a really traumatic, abusive past, the leadership is not always equipped to be able to handle that particular situation.
Right.
So when that does arise and that comes up in couples counseling, you can say, okay, well, you know what, let's be able to, and we would hope that there would be a resource to provide for people who are going through that, who need that.
Right. So basically it'll be like, basically if you go into marriage counseling, I'm talking about as if you're already married and you having some issues in your marriage, you don't go to an individual that's been divorced 3 or 4 times, right? That's what.
Well, I wouldn't necessarily say that because it depends, because some of those experiences really drive good counseling, to be honest with you.
Right.
And not all counselors are going to be perfect, that they're going to have successful marriages and a happily ever after.
Right.
But being able to seek someone out who's going to be able to help you in your particular situation is important.
Right. Okay. So you say seek outside counseling, right? And you saying that sometimes you might not have people within the community that's able to help your situation at that point. So now we're talking about seeking outside counseling. A lot of brothers in particular wouldn't feel comfortable going to outside counseling because depending on the nature of the relationship, like you said, it might be multiple. It might be a multiple nashim thing, and they don't feel like an outside counselor might be able to understand that situation. Then how would you say to deal with that type of situation?
Well, I think that this is a process. And currently we don't have, we have a few, I know we have a few trained and licensed therapists that are Hebrews, but we don't necessarily utilize them in that capacity for their trained skill. It may be even leadership, but they're not leading the counseling world. And it's primarily because counseling is not promoted as a necessity in our communities. It's looked at as something that's taboo, that you don't want to get counseling outside. You go counsel with leadership, but you won't go counseling with a professional because it's taboo. And so this process that we're trying to start now is getting people comfortable with the idea, to make it less taboo, to make it normal, to normalize the idea of counseling so that people don't feel discouraged to seek out outside counseling. Because if you have somebody who has a mood disorder, or has schizophrenia, we don't have the ability to, you can't go to the morgue to deal with that. Not if he's not trained. I'm not, always going to advocate for somebody on medication, but some people do need medication. You know what I mean? Like, we need to be able to help our people wean themselves off medication properly, and how to deal with issues so that we can have successful relationships. And our leadership is not always capable. So it's going to be a process where we are building. That's why there were those steps there of what we could do in the meantime while we're trying to build institutions that handle therapy in our communities.
So, because I know you deal with a lot of people being, therapists and so forth, and being in social service. So how do you deal with an individual that goes from, as they say, 0 to 60 quick? They might be in such a good mood at one time, and then all of a sudden, boom, it switches off. Everybody can't take that. Everyone can't deal with that. And I know that as Israelites, we got, like you said, we got people that have mental issues, that have daddy issues, that have all types of post-traumatic syndromes within their lives. How do you deal with an individual that's so moody and gets moody so quick?
Well,
Just distance yourself from them, give them a minute. How do you deal with such an individual?
was, it depends on, well, are you saying how do we, dealing with
Yeah.
the other person who has a mood
Yes,
disorder?
who has those issues? Because
Well, it
we could
depends on the
clearly.
severity of the mood disorder, because sometimes people just snap. They get an attitude, they roll their eyes, but just being honest with people. I find that honesty is always, it comes off more sincere than when you just get an attitude because someone else has an attitude. So when you see a sister or a brother that they snap with you a little bit, and just being honest, say, did I do something to you? Because sometimes people not even aware that they're being triggered and that they're having a reaction. And so just bringing it to the forefront to be able to say, hey, brother, I mean, you got a little loud. I wasn't trying to be offensive. I want to make sure you know that I'm not trying to trigger, to make you angry or whatever, so that the person can say, oh, did I get loud, or did I roll my eyes, or did I, you know what I mean? So to make them aware of that is something important. And sometimes people are doing it on purpose. They do have an attitude, and giving people space to handle their issues is really important. We like to bombard people when they have an attitude sometimes. And, really, what's wrong? What's wrong? It's okay to give people their space to be able to say, I'm here for you when you're ready, and leave it at that.
Right.
And allowing people also to work through their issues in a healthy way. They can't just be going off on people, and that's when the leadership has to step in to really help the person handle some of those emotional, issues going on.
Yeah, because we do have a lot of, always said we always got a lot of tweakers and in the nation, people that tweak. Me and a brother, we have an ongoing joke about people who tweet, and someone put it up in the chat room about what do you call it, dependency on certain kind of chemicals. um they wrote opioid epidemic, but I don't think that that's really rampant in our community, that rampant. But I know that there might be other things that they're using. um um when I mean other things, I mean like SF and stuff like that. um and then I see a lot of brothers who do indulge in that kind of thing. Sometimes when they come to
Just want to bring up a point about that, Leah, just briefly, because this is an important point, because we have a lot of people in our communities who, let's just be honest, use marijuana, smoke marijuana, and they use it as, for whatever reason, medicinal, therapeutic,
right.
a lot of ways. But we have to understand also that there's abuse that comes with that as well.
Right.
And we have to learn a difference between drowning out our emotions so that you don't feel, and using something recreationally, and whatever. And a lot of times when you see the abuse of these things, are people who are trying not to feel, and they, because it's marijuana or whatever you have it, alcohol in some cases, that they think it's legal, or it's not legal, but that it's not, it's natural, and so that it's okay. But why is the question? Why you smoking every single day, all day? And these are important things to address within yourself, to understand. Are you drowning something out? Are you drowning out some thoughts, some emotions? These are important things to recognize.
Yes, I was getting to that because I feel like there is there are a lot of issues with that. There are a lot of issues with like I said, I see people come and they don't see it in themselves, but the people who don't indulge in those type of activities, you can see it. They become irritable. Individuals become irritable because you're going through a form of withdrawal. Shabbat come, they're not doing this, but you're irritable because the dependency on whatever it is, the chemical is kicking in. So they become irritable and ornery and all of the above. So just there are a lot of issues. I'm sure that I have some of them, but I think what you were I think that the main point that you were trying to bring across is to recognize your issues, recognize your triggers, and not be so reactive, to be a little bit more thoughtful before you react, and to put your emotions in check. Am I correct?
Kane, that's correct. And also, not to forget about the family piece and the influence that you as an individual have on the nation, about how your emotions affects the way you deal with your family, and in turn how you deal with in your community, and then how we, deal with each other as a nation, and how some of these issues are affecting our families, because we started out talking about the nigger marriage and how it was an attack on our families specifically. Right. And so it was an attack on an individual to affect our families, to really affect us long-lasting effects that we would never recover from. So when we're talking about these individual counseling, we're really talking about rebuilding the family structure.
Right.
So that when we pursue coming from a place, a genuine place, that we're not coming with all this baggage and arguments and trauma and putting that into our families as well. And our children are then experiencing that too. So we really are doing the same thing that the oppressor did.
Right.
We're trying to stop that. Is what we are trying to do.
And one last thing, you say about we have to look outside of the U.S. and I agree with that. But there are some people that would say we're only traded in one slave master for another. How would you answer that?
Well, I didn't say tomorrow.
Right.
And I also didn't say where.
Right.
But the point is that we know what prophecy is, right? So there's only so long you can stay in hell before you also get burned up with it, If you in a burning house, and the Creator always say, come out of her, my people. We all know that.
Right.
You're in a burning house, and the flames are all around you, and the windows are busting, and the alarms are going off, and you just sitting there buying houses and cutting your grass, and I mean, at some point, your families are falling apart, and at some point, you have to say, well, let's get out of the house so we can start repairing some of this stuff, because you're doing the smoke and the fumes and the flames ain't going to help. So, of course, I'm advocating for a plan, a strategic plan for an exit strategy.
You know what's funny about that, and I'm not going to keep you up too long because I know this could get dragged out. So, but I looked at an interview on Vlad TV. I don't know if you ever looked on interviews on Vlad TV. Well, this guy, he has like a lot of interview with. He tends to interview like a lot of rappers from the 90s and individuals that were part of the industry. So he did an interview this week with a rapper named Napoleon. He was part of the Outlaws, part of the whole Tupac crew and group before he got killed. And this guy Napoleon, he turned Muslim, right? He's I believe he's a Sunni Muslim. So he turned Muslim, and he's 7 years ago. This is like a black guy from America, from Newark, New Jersey, from the hood with tattoos all on him. But he took Islam very seriously, and he married a Yemenite Muslim woman, and he moved to Saudi Arabia, and I couldn't believe it. And he was just explaining, and it's something that you just said, he was just explaining how he wanted to give his children a different opportunity at life than what he did, because he grew up, he saw both his mother and father get murdered in front of him in his house. He grew up in the streets of Newark selling drugs and all those things. So he just made a decision that since I'm Muslim now, I'm going to go to Saudi Arabia, learn the language, and I'm going to raise my children up in that manner. And I thought that was so like, it bugged me out, because I was like, Saudi Arabia, like out of all the countries, you go to Saudi Arabia. But, it makes sense to him, that he didn't want his children to grow up, around gunfire. He wanted his children. And I'm like, Saudi Arabia is like the strictest of all the countries that practice Islam. It's like Saudi Arabia is one of the strictest, you know. So I thought that that was very interesting. I don't know if you want to chime in on that.
No, I mean, you know, as far as my point as seeking, you know, resources and refuge outside of captivity, I mean, that should be, you know, it's the Most High's, you know, will and, you know, a part of prophecy that we do so, but it's not going to happen through, you know, someone just scooping you up in the rapture and taking you where you need to go. You got to be strategic in your planning to make it happen for you and your family. So I always encourage people to really think about how this is going to look for their family. Because your leadership is not going to always be the one to just take you there, to take you where you need to be. You kind of have a plan, need to have a plan for your family and how your children are going to be able to come out of this. If you're trying to build something for your children for the future, so maybe you're saying you're not going nowhere, because I know a lot of people who saying I'm not leaving, I'm not going nowhere, this is where I was born, this is where I'm staying, and my children can do whatever they want. Well, build something that's long lasting that your children would be able to leave then, so that they can build their families and not have experiences of hell.
Hallelujah. So my sister, it's been great, it's been enlightening. You're one of the, you know, one of the best people that I've had on. Very insightful. I wish that we could do it more. You know, I wish you could come up with some other topics. But we'll see how that works out in the future. And but I just have to say I'm very impressed. Torah once again. Everybody out there, give a thumbs up to our sister Leah. If you're on Facebook Live, give that thumbs up, the hearts, and all the good things that come with it. If you're on YouTube, just give me the one, the hearts, whatever emojis they got up there, because I think that the sister did a wonderful job. And I thank you, my sister, for coming on with us tonight. And we thank the God of Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob for giving us health, for enlightening us, and for giving us such a well-versed sister as yourself to come on and share the understanding that the Most High God has blessed you with, my sister.
So, Rabbi, I appreciate the opportunity.
Shalom, shalom. Hallelujah. So everyone, we thank you for tuning in. May the Most High God bless each and every one of you. And remember, tonight, in the morning, we will begin services at 11 a.m. on this same bat channel. I was going to say same bat time, but it wouldn't be the same bat time. So on this same channel, we hope to see you. Don't forget to subscribe to our channel. Don't forget to like the videos. Don't forget to share the link of the videos so everybody will know this great job that our sister did. I know probably there are a lot of people sleeping right now, but she did an excellent job, and this should be shared out to everyone. Oh, I have a message to everyone. Also, I spoke to Brother Morey Tavel called me. He wanted me to upload the Charlotte Shabbat on YouTube. I told him, we were told not to stream. He spoke to his uncle. His uncle who is Saul Aharon, who is the leader of the house down in Charlotte. Told him, according to Tavel, that it was okay for me to upload. So I'm working on it, uploading it now. So that upload will be on my Uziel Lewy YouTube channel. You could go there also, and you could check out the videos from the singing from that weekend that are up right now. So there the name is Uziel Lewy, the Uziel Lewy channel, Uzziel Lewy, Lewi. You could go to the Uziel Lewy channel. You could see all of the drumming and the singing, the teachings. It's going to take a little time to upload, but it will be there. So once again, thank you everyone for tuning in. May Yah bless you and keep you. Hallelujah. Shalom, shalom.